Hello, welcome back to another video. Thought I'd change up the location a bit today, so I'm sitting downstairs and I'm going to review The Colony by Audrey Magee. So The Colony is a book that has been longlisted for this year's Booker Prize, and spoiler alert, I think my opinion is slightly off compared to everybody else. So let's get into it. We have an English artist, a French linguist and an Irish fisherman on a remote island in the Irish Sea. It sounds like the start to a crass joke, but this is the setup for this book. So in this, the English artist Lloyd travels over to this island intending to paint the cliffs and the island life. Then joining him is a French linguist who is trying to protect the Irish language from being dominated by English and effectively dying out. And we have a young Irish fisherman who has always lived on the island, James, who really just wants the freedom to make his own decisions. This is then juxtaposed against the atrocities happening in Belfast. This is set in the late 60s, early 70s, when really the troubles in Ireland are very prolific, to do with the Protestant Catholic divide and the IRA being quite active at that time. So we're placed in this microcosm on this island, and all of this stuff is happening in the periphery, and so we get this contrast within the book. I think the book was well done. I just want to shout out, I listened to this on audio, and the narrator was fabulous. It was narrated by Stephen Hogan, and he did add such a good layer to the book. I don't know if he's Irish, but his Irish accent was very good, as was his French accent. So I very much enjoyed the experience of listening to it, and I thought that did elevate the book. From a theme perspective, obviously there was a huge focus on language and colonisation and what colonisation has done to language, with a specific spotlight on the Irish language, but also talking about some other examples as well within the book. And I found that fascinating. That was really interesting. It's something that I hadn't really considered before, the dying out of some of these languages. There are many examples across the world, but I've never really looked at it particularly through the scope of colonialism, and obviously that makes complete sense now that I have thought about it. But I liked the way that it brought that up, and it really sort of explored that within this book, and that was brilliant to learn about. I also liked that it covered sort of women's roles in these sort of Irish towns in the 60s and 70s, and I would have liked more of that. So we did get glimmers of that, of the roles of these Irish women within the family construct and within the community, but I could have read a whole book just based on that and probably would have liked it more. So yeah, there were bits of that which I really ate up, but it was a secondary, tertiary theme really in the book, and I think that was maybe the point, that these women didn't really get much airtime in reality. They didn't get it in the book either. So I can sort of see why the author maybe went down that route, but for me, I would have rather have more from the women's perspective. The book also did have a very nice narrative flow. It sort of lilted, and it really did flow very well, and I think that was in a large part because I listened to it on audio. I think if I had read it physically, I probably wouldn't have picked up on that in the same way, just because I probably would have struggled with some of the dialect, etc. But it was very well written. However, I found jumping from sort of the quiet island life to the violence in Belfast, I found it really jarring, and I know that was the point, but I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel like we had enough time in Belfast to make enough of an impact, and that was just a personal thing. And also just a shout out here to Fraser Simons, who I did discuss this part of the book with a little bit, and he sort of made me see what the author was trying to do, but it still didn't work for me. And it is a very quiet novel. You've got all this stuff going on and all these themes and all these sort of big messages, but it is very quiet in its approach, and sorry to say it, there's no other way to put it, I found it quite boring. I very nearly DNF'd it, and had I not been buddy reading it, I buddy read it with the lovely Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Had I not been buddy reading it, I would have DNF'd it at about 30% because it was really quite monotonous in places. And I think maybe, again, that was sort of the point, but it did feel like a slog, especially the first half. And though there were things I liked about it, overall, it was just really boring. And it also did that thing which really annoys me in the books, where quite a lot of the dialogue was he said and then she said and then he said and then she said and then he said, and I was like, come on, use some other words, please. If I read the word said one more time, or listen to the word said one more time, I'm gonna explode. And yeah, artistic choice, but it's one of those little things that once I notice it just bugs the hell out of me. So yeah, that really irritated me. So sort of in summary, I can see why this book was longlisted, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, given the level of positive feedback that it's had, and the fact that it is covering some really interesting topics, and the way that it is written. If it wins the Booker, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But it was too literary for me. It's one of these books where I felt it was almost written with a prize in mind, and it hampered my enjoyment of it because it felt like it was trying to achieve literary excellence, and I just don't care about that. All I want to do is sit down and enjoy a book and be lost in it. And yeah, obviously take something away from it at the end would be great, but it was just too literary for me. So yeah, if you like a little bit of action with your literary fiction, you're not really going to get it from this book. And as I said, there are so many glowing reviews out here, so I'm absolutely in the minority unpopular opinions category here. But yeah, it didn't do it for me. I gave it 3 stars because I can see that it has got a lot of merit, but yeah, not my jam, and certainly wouldn't be my #1 pick for the Booker.